Hey everybody, welcome to CNET's AutoComplete from Roadshow. Chris Parker, managing editor. I'm Brian Cooley, editor at large. Tim Stevens is off shooting something fantastic. So we're going to hold down the fort here at the Geneva Auto Show, our 2016 Geneva edition. Chris, let's start off with the cars that we think people should know about. Some of our favorites that are also of great import. In fact, we're right by one of them over here, the Hyundai Ioniq.
Yeah, it's, you know, people talk about Prius killers all the time.
Yeah.
They have, ever since the Prius found success. This may be the first one to have a real crack at it because it's a three-pronged approach. It's got a full-on electric model, it's got a hybrid plug-in, and then it's just got a straight-up hybrid, so it covers the entire waterfront.
And the thing looks pretty good. It doesn't scream weird electric alternative car from its looks. You know, the Prius still looks like you're making a point, right? This car looks kind of like just a nice little compact car with that nice new Hyundai face. Like all alternative cars, for some reason the butt ends up way up here high. I don't know why. Can't they make an alternative car where the butt comes down, but they don't? So I was agreeing with you on that. This could be the biggest single thrust against Prius. It's credible. Notably, their prediction in all their materials is we will be the #2 electrified car maker in a few years. They still won't claim that they can knock Toyota off their throne.
Well, and I think that's a wise move. There's a lot of years that the Prius has grown, not only in terms of volume, but mind share. But in recent years, it's had a tough go of it. There's a new Prius now, and I guarantee you, Hyundai would have loved to have released this car a year ago ahead of the new car.
Yeah, the timing would have been more advantageous. And in this $2 gas era we're having here in the United States, they're all struggling a bit. The plug-in Prius doesn't really sell that well.
No.
The standard Prius does. So that was a big trend story in terms of cars that are really going after a major king of the hill. Toyota CHR, this is roughly in the same bucket of people that are shopping.
It is. It's definitely a funkier approach and maybe not so eco-minded. They will have a hybrid model here in Europe, but it's not guaranteed for the US. And in fact, what we're expecting is a traditional 2-liter 4-cylinder, normally aspirated engine, and a CVT. So this is a model that was supposed to be a Scion, but Scion recently closed.
That's right. This is one of the migrations that came over to Toyota.
Yeah, that's why the name doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Toyota, and the aesthetics don't really make a whole lot of sense for Toyota.
That's what I was wondering. It doesn't look like a Toyota. And now you reminded me, because it wasn't intended to be when it came through design.
Well, in all fairness, you know, Akio Toyoda, the CEO, has been talking about shaking up design for a long time. And he's done that with Lexus, you know, having a new styling language, but it hasn't really done it as successfully with lower end models in Toyota. And this will give them, you know, a youth entry into a very hot segment with models, you know, like the Honda HR-V and the Nissan Juke. So.
Juke, don't get me started. Volvo V90, you and I are wagon guys.
We are.
This is a home run.
It is gorgeous. And, you know, we gave the XC90, which has the same architecture underneath, the same scalable production architecture, the same powertrain technology, largely, we gave it a Roadshow Shift Award for our Vehicle of the Year. We love it. I mean, the aesthetics of it are gorgeous inside and out. The infotainment is a solid update. It's novel. It's a smart product.
And the wagon lines on it, you know, most Americans are not into wagons. We're an SUV crossover bunch, but this is one that looks so good that I think some Americans will actually consider it and say, yeah, it's not as tall and utilitarian as I might like, or chunky and outdoorsy as I want to pretend I am, but damn, that's a good-looking car.
It is, and I would expect for it to spawn a chunkier XC version with a little more ground clearance, a little more cladding, to kind of get the people that are in between a traditional upright SUV like the XC90 and a normal wagon.
I almost hate to see them do that. It's so damn pretty the way it is. Grand Sport Corvette, this kind of came out at the last minute as the show was opening. Can you tell us about that?
So there's been a lot of white space between the standard Corvette Stingray, which is about 55 grand, and
a bargain.
Yeah, and the Z06, which is a bargain in its own right, and that's in the early 80s, 80, 82.
Okay.
So there's a lot of space there. And so what they've done is they've brought back the Grand Sport, which is, you know, a name with 50 years plus of motorsports history, and it's basically a Stingray in terms of motor, but a Z06 in terms of everything else, from the aerodynamics to the cooling to the brakes. So it's sort of a halfway house, but it's track-oriented, it's normally aspirated, it's probably very tunable. Looks like you know, we don't know what the pricing is going to be, but it looks like,
figure it'll slot pretty cleanly in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Grand Sport's out for the vet fans. You've got a middle ground with that. I'm going to go Z06. Very polarizing Maserati came out here. Their entry into premium SUVs. I mean, everyone premium's got to be doing an SUV. Levante.
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 Well,
what do you think? Okay. We're being a little hesitant here.
We've been waiting for this car for so long. And by so long, I mean, do you remember the Kubang concept? Not the recent one, but the original one.
No, I don't think I do.
That was 2003.
That's why I don't.
2003, which is, before Porsche did the Cayenne.
Yeah.
They had an SUV concept. And since that time, so they had a chance to be in really early into this craze and sort of set the tone.
Instead, they're really late.
Instead, they're late. And they're, there's still a lot of vehicles that are coming out right now that haven't even hit the market. Things like the F-Pace from Jaguar.
Yeah.
Right?
Nice looking car.
Nice looking car. But now the market's crowded. There's, they're going to have to fight for mind share. And, based on the sedans that I've found recently not to be that exciting to drive.
Yeah, we weren't crazy about the Ghibli.
No.
It was a bit of a letdown. And this one we think has some kind of polarizing looks from certain angles.
Yeah, but that can work in the SUV market.
Yeah, you're right. And like you say, if you got to stand out one way or the other.
Yeah. This will be their best seller, no question.
Yeah, it will,
I think
just
it's pretty
because
short
it's an
order.
SUV, right?
Right, because it's where the market
It's
is.
the damnedest thing. I mean, that was the Cayenne effect we saw. Everyone laughed at the Cayenne. Again, this is hard to remember now. It was so many years ago. No one can imagine the Cayenne not being a center model for Porsche. When it first came out, boy, a lot of people were like, "What? What happened to Porsche?"
The self-anointed purists were all upset, the same way they were with the BMW X5.
Self-anointed purists.
Yeah.
But now it's the backbone of the company.
Yeah.
That and Macan, I mean, those are your backbone cars. It is basically a crossover and SUV company that also has some sports cars. If you want to take a brutal hard look at it,
Yeah.
that'll work for Maserati as well.
Well, and as long as they continue to turn out gorgeous products elsewhere, and this is the financial backbone and it sells,
Yeah.
that's okay. It's got a nice interior. It's got a modern twin-turbo V6. The all-wheel drive system they have is not bad. So it could be a very nice vehicle.
We will live, here's my prediction, you see it online right now. Hope I don't regret this. We will live to see a Ferrari SUV.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I actually believe that. Yeah, and they will swear up and down right now that will never, ever, ever happen. But the market says otherwise. I want to wrap up our show wrap on the cars here before we go into the rest of this week's news with one that I love, and it's going to be a heartbreaker, the Kia Optima Wagon. Europe only, as far as we can tell. They haven't said no US, but they haven't really mentioned US, as I understand it. What a pretty affordable wagon that would be.
It's a gorgeous car. It plays on the styling language beautifully of the sedan.
Beautifully.
It's got nice utility, and it would be more affordable. Most of the station wagons, what few exist, are all in premium segments because they can absorb, the small volume because they've got the margins to make it happen.
Mercedes, BMW, V90. But then if we could just get, the Accord wagon, I thought, the one that Europe has had many times, pretty car. It's basically it's a former Acura wagon in our market when we've had it. Boy, they just cheat us.
I've got
on
one
the
in my
wagons.
garage.
Do you?
I have a TSX Sport wagon.
I'll be
yeah.
damned. See, we're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're with us. Okay, let's turn to some other news we got going on this week away from Geneva. So everyone's always said, boy, it'll be a bad day when a self-driving car has its first accident that it causes. Then the headlines will go run amok and the public will go, oh, I'm not into this anymore. Well, it happened. Google's self-driving car, one of their RXs, not one of their little bubble cars, had a minor fender bender in Mountain View where Google is headquartered. It apparently saw some sandbags, freaked out about those. To avoid those, it sort of errantly moved away too much and scraped a bus at low speed, single-digit mile per hour. No one hurt, no, barely any damage. However, Google says, yeah, that was us. Our code didn't handle the situation right. No injuries, no harm. Do you think people are going to look at that now and say, oh, see, this isn't going to work? Or is the public ready to give it a little bit of slack?
I think they're ready to give it a little bit of slack. I mean, there will be the hand wringers, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
But the reality is this was, if you're going to have to crash a vehicle at some point, this is probably the ideal scenario because it was very minor, it was very slow speeds, and they came out and said, hey, look, our car is learning, and it made a bad bet in the way that humans will make a bad bet.
And that was the key, is that they came out right away. They never tried to bury the story or wait to process it. As far as we can tell, immediately when it was reported, they said, yeah, our code was off a little bit. We fixed it. We continue to move on. Now, it's easy to say when nobody was hurt. When this happens and there's an injury or, let's hope not, a fatality from a self-driving car, it's going to be a different introspection. But right now, the first one, we've broken the seal, if you will, on the self-driving hand-wringing. Update on Dieselgate, we have so many of our viewers to write in and say, I've got one of those cars, what do you know about a fix? The big class action suit with so many people, hundreds of parties that are suing for so much money in federal court. They had a hearing, says March 24th, VW must come back with a plan to satisfy the class. So that's the big one there with the class. This is not the same as EPA and CARB saying what's the fix, and that's also not the same as DOJ saying we got to figure out your penalties. So the 3 big prongs, I wish we had more specifics for people about the fix.
It's been a holding pattern, and there are so many different parties that are involved, and it's been a process that I don't think has been handled terribly well by Volkswagen from a PR standpoint, and it's going to drag on for months and months. Unfortunately for our viewers, we just won't have the answer, I think, right away.
No, this may be a story that literally forms and resolves across this year. I don't think we're going to have this done by summer.
No.
I mean, first we have to get the fixes. They've got to be approved. They've got to be accepted. Then they've got to be done across 600,000 cars in the U.S. market, mostly Volkswagen. That's where we are on that. It's our latest. Every single episode, we bring you the latest on Dieselgate and always aim it toward what's going to happen with your car. Nissan has a telematics app for their Leaf. Just about every car maker seems to these days. We just showed you it in our Leaf video for On Cars about a week or so ago. They just disabled it because it turns out it was so easy to hack. As I understand it, we haven't tried this ourselves, but we can't now. All you needed was the VIN number of the car to set up an account to control one.
It's almost not hacking at that level, right?
It's not even hacking.
No.
The VIN number's in the windshield.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't have to break in the car to get that.
No.
And all you could do, now you couldn't drive the car or take over controls like in that Jeep hack that Chris Valasek did a while back with Charlie Miller, but you could turn on or off the HVAC, which can drain your battery pretty badly,
Absolutely.
screw up someone's commute, and read their driving history based on the energy screens. So it's a little bit of a privacy invasion.
Sure.
So that was the big problem there, and they have got it as of today, here on this Wednesday in the Geneva Auto Show. This is what, the 2nd? There is no patch yet. It's still disabled. You can still go to the web portal, though, for your car if you want to do telematics on your Leaf. I don't know if it's coincident, but this is probably the lowest rated automotive app we've ever looked at. It gets like an average of 1.5 stars on Android or Apple.
That's brutal.
It's hated.
Yeah.
So maybe it's no surprise. Before we take a break, speaking of securing cars, IDC, which is a very big and respected research and analysis company, did a big survey of car makers, their suppliers who sell them their gear, and some European drivers, and found there's probably going to be 1 to 3 years, and they're admitting this basically, before all those kind of holes, like in that Leaf app, are sealed up. Basically, automakers have apparently not taken cybersecurity in cars very seriously in the last few years, despite rolling it out. So we get a lot of questions about, are they doing enough about securing cars as they connect them?
Well,
this seems to indicate no.
Yeah, given the long gestation period for cars in general to develop them,
Right.
I'm not surprised that it's 2 or 3 years that they've got to go back and look at, because people weren't really talking about car hacking to a great extent a few years ago.
It was just in the geek community then.
Yeah.
There was no mainstream awareness of it.
Right.
And again, the Jeep hack by Valasek and Miller, and now this Leaf thing, and there's been a few other major Highline ones, they've got everyone's attention all of a sudden. And by the way, we're still waiting for later on this year, the feds are going to release their first guidelines of what should be secured in the world of cybersecurity in cars. It'll be very vague to start, a framework they're working out with automakers, but even that isn't baked yet. We're going to come back in a minute, continuing AutoComplete. We're going to tell you about the Cadillac dealer that may not be in your neighborhood much longer when AutoComplete continues. Back to AutoComplete, Brian Cooley with Chris Paukert. This is episode 8 for March 4th. We're coming to you, as you can see, from the Geneva Auto Show, which you've been coming here for the better part of a decade, right?
It's my favorite auto show.
Me too.
It's the most walkable, it's neutral ground, and there's all kinds of dreamers here, right? From the supercar dreamers to the eco-car guys, to the 7-figure luxury cars. It's a great environment.
7-figure, that's the thing. You get more 7-figure cars here. This was interesting about Geneva, and it's kind of hard to portray, even in coverage, is you can walk around for the better part of an acre and bump into nothing but boutique makers who take supercars and go add $1 million in upgrades and conversions to that. They buy Lamborghinis as raw material and redo them from the ground up.
They do. It's crazy.
It's a Swiss thing.
It is.
They love to do that. It's crazy people. God love them. Let's talk about Cadillac now. Bring it a little bit further down back to earth. If you've got a small Cadillac dealer in your smallish town, Cadillac says maybe you won't have them for long. Their boss, Johan Denyshen. It's always a tough one to pronounce. Mr. Denyshen says the small dealers that are often twinned with like a GMC or a Chevy, which they don't like anyway, but they think those may need to go virtual, which means they have no stock and they pull from like a regional center. It's actually a very modern idea, kind of Amazon-esque, but these dealers are not interested in not being a dealer anymore.
Well, that's true, and it'll be very hard to get those small dealers out of the picture because every state has different franchise law agreements.
Oh, right.
It's very difficult to take away dealers from people. I mean, you saw that with the bankruptcy for General Motors, and you've seen that with, when you have to shed an entire division, how difficult that can be. And there are standalone Cadillac dealers of all sizes, so that makes it more problematic than something like, Mercury closing and Lincoln staying open.
Yeah, just taking a brand away is one thing, but saying, look, you're no longer one of our dealers, that is tough. Franchise laws get in the way. What they want to do instead is do these virtual dealers, saying, look, if you're a small town dealer, do your Cadillac stuff by having digital materials, iPads, virtual reality goggles, we'll create the media. Don't have people come to the showroom to look at the iPad with you, that's stupid. Go to where they are, their business, their office, make appointments after dinner, whatever it is, and show them materials, iPad Pro, put on Oculus Rift, what have you. And as we mentioned, no stock, which is a big problem in the American market. Europeans are used to ordering their cars.
Absolutely.
I think it's the same in Asia. Here in the US, we want to go down on Saturday and bring something home.
It's a paradigm shift in the way that we buy cars, but it's probably a smart thing for the automaker. They get to lean out their dealership base, which is still too big.
It is, right?
They're still a little over-dealered, so they get to take care of that. They have a newer high-tech approach, which makes them look more sophisticated as an automaker.
Yeah.
It allows them to probably build fewer variants of cars that are just going to sit around. And on some level, it keeps dealer stocks way down. If they're still franchises and they only have 1 or 2 cars in stock for a test drive, I think that could be an interesting way to go.
That's the thing. You still have to have some cars for test drive, at least one of each major model. For some of these dealers, one of the stats I saw in Automotive News is there are 90 dealers out there that sell 50 or fewer cars a year.
Oof.
That's very low volume. I mean, that's.
You need to be selling a Pagani or something in order to make
right,
that
that's
work.
The kind of volume, right,
yeah.
where that works.
Well, the other interesting thing about that is I think it's a really long-term view, because if you move to level 4 autonomy, where you don't even need a steering wheel and it's a living room on wheels, all you really need to know is that the living room looks the way you want it and it's comfortable for you. And you can figure out a lot of that virtually in a way, you don't need to know about steering feel or any of that stuff.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And at that point, you just need to have a buck of the modern interiors at your local showroom. You go sit in the thing, you can look at the looks of it on digital materials, and then you're right, the whole idea of test drive doesn't matter so much when and if we get to level 4, 5, and 6 autonomy, which I believe in, but I'm not sure the Cadillac owner is going to be the first to go there. I mean, that's not necessarily the youngest, most tech-forward group. That's what they're trying to work on right now.
Sure, but they've been trying to push in that direction. Johan comes from Audi. That's something that he wants. And frankly, it's an interesting message to be coming out of General Motors, who's been kind of fighting Tesla tooth and nail with their model of showrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see where things go with your local Cadillac dealer. It's more than about a small town Cadillac story. It's about the future of retailing. That's why it's so interesting. It could be the seeds of a broader trend of ways of selling cars at more dealers than just that. Uber is, a transportation company. We get that, but they are in the future looking like almost more than that, an autonomous driving advocate and research funder and even executor of research. They're going to expand a center in Pittsburgh, working with Carnegie Mellon. Interesting, not in Silicon Valley. Pittsburgh, not Mountain View. I mean, a whole lot of interesting, hey, wait a minute, not everything happens in Silicon Valley cues here. And they're actually going to do a dig here. They're going to expand a big physical center to do autonomous vehicle real field testing. I think a lot of folks don't maybe quite yet realize how serious Uber is about autonomy.
Well, look, that's their number one cost, right, is employing drivers. Yeah. So you take, and it's also their number one pain point in terms of image. So if you remove those things,
exactly.
you're a lot further down the road.
And the efficiencies from that, like you say, I mean, the cost of drivers is primarily their cost. If that were to go away and this whole insurance issue goes away, because now you kind of make more of a separation from taxis. I mean, you have less complaints from the cab and the licensed cab business when you're actually an autonomous company. You have a different set of hurdles in perception, but you're no longer a head-on competitor.
Yeah.
That's a whole different technology you're putting out there all of a sudden. A car that will not be self-driving, because that would defeat the point, the new NSX. Orders just opened days ago before we did this show now. You can go to the Acura NSX configurator at nsx.acura.com and actually build and configure a real one, not just look at prototype specs. 170 to 215K, I think, are how the final prices work out.
I'll take 2.
Yeah, okay, good. And on your card, I'll take 2 also. We've got 2 pieces coming up from Emmy and Tim. What's our coverage plan here?
Emmy's actually going to check out the factory. A lot of people don't remember that this supercar is built in Ohio, of all places.
Marysville.
So she's going to go check out how they build this, high-tech hybrid supercar. And Tim is going to get the chance to drive the car. Once again, he had an early drive of it in Tokyo, but it was very brief of a prototype car. He's going to get a fuller street drive of that vehicle, and we're going to take a look at it in the context of the original NSX.
Nice, nice. Okay, so we're going to have both cars side by side. That's pretty cool, because between the new NSX and the old NSX, you've got about everybody in the auto world is in the fan camp of one, the other, or both. There's almost no one who's not touched by one of the other NSXs. So this is the universal story of life.
Absolutely, and we may even have a treat with a pro driver.
Aha, okay. Could have a hot shoe in there with Tim. I would like to see Tim actually turn pale on the track. Never seen that, but there has to be a bar at which even he scares.
He's really poised.
I know, terribly so. All right, folks, for Chris Barker, Brian Cooley, that's AutoComplete Episode 8, coming to you with a special edition here from 2016 Geneva Auto Show. Talk to you again in a week with all the latest news of cars and high-tech driving.